what you waiting for. I think we're ready to ride.
Hey guys, I'm BenFMeredith, and welcome to my review of the camera everybody is talking about right now, the Nikon ZR. I'm a cinematographer and director based out of Los Angeles, California. I don't post as much as I'd like, but if you dig through my channel, you'll find a lot of filmmaking tips and tricks. Most deal with cinematography, but we definitely talk about other things as well. And a lot of my latest videos are taken from my TikTok account. So if you like tips and tricks on filmmaking, go ahead and follow that account on TikTok. It's @MakinMovies. And to just get this out of the way, it also helps if you like this video and subscribe to my channel. But if you do go ahead and follow my TikTok, there's something like 40 plus videos, all the way from beginner to intermediate to expert. Now that that's out of the way, I don't talk about gear too much. So not many cameras excite me these days. I think in the last 5 years, most of them are very capable and provide really nice images. But the Nikon ZR intrigued me. It intrigued me because it seemed like a camera that fits into my workflow in a variety of different ways. So when I was digging through all the YouTube content and footage and reviews, some of it was lacking a specific perspective that I feel like I might be able to provide. So I decided to rent one for a couple days, just shoot a bunch of tests and provide you guys with my thoughts. So what is my perspective? Well, a lot of the content I was seeing was coming from a little bit more of a content creation side of things. And I'm definitely not speaking negatively on that. That's literally what I'm doing right now. But I haven't really seen much perspective from a narrative filmmaking side of things. In cinematography, I definitely shoot a lot of commercial work, a lot of product work, a lot of music videos, but narrative is my main focus. And with that in mind, I thought I could give a different angle on this camera. A shutter angle, you might say. Okay, that was really bad. It won't happen again. Well, it might happen. It might happen again. I've used a lot of different cameras in my 10 years of being a DP, and I've shot 3 feature films. I've owned many cinema cameras, the VariCam LT, the Red Komodo, and I still own the Mini LF, but it pretty much just stays at a rental house. So I wanted to see if this camera could fit into my workflow of day-to-day cinematography. Product videos, corporate work, stuff that goes on social media, Instagram, TikTok, but also larger scale productions, like higher end short films and even full feature films. So if you want a video that goes through all the specs and scientific data of this camera, this is not that video. There's plenty of really good ones on YouTube I highly recommend you check out. This video is going to be a little bit more from the perspective of a narrative filmmaker and just how the image feels to me, how flexible it is, the types of situations I could put it into, and I've done a lot of stress tests on this camera, so we're going to get into all of that in a little bit. I've separated this into chapters so you can skip ahead to the image quality, but first we're going to talk about some of the more boring stuff of this camera that I still found super intriguing. First up is the ergonomics. I only had it for a couple days, so I just took some quick pictures of it in my hand. But it's something you can't really know until it's actually in your hands. This thing is tiny. It reminds me of the OG pocket cinema camera from Blackmagic. If you put a pancake lens on this, you can literally fit it in your back pocket. It is thin, and I don't mind the lack of grip and the other things some people have problems with because it keeps it really small. And let's talk about the screen. It is that good. I didn't use an external monitor for any of the footage that's in this video. It doesn't seem like a big difference, but having that 4-inch screen just built into the camera is really phenomenal. I think I also only had it at 50% brightness the entire time. I'm not gonna get into too much of the other complaints about the camera. Micro HDMI, yeah, okay, it's kind of a bummer. 1 card slot in the bottom, kind of weird to access it. Okay, that's fine. And I'm gonna wave off a lot of these things throughout the video because we have to remember the context here. This camera is $2,000. That's f***ing insane. This punches well above its weight in that price range. Essentially, you're getting 2 cameras in one. You're getting a very capable Nikon camera that does really serviceable video, amazing photography, which we'll also get into, and then you switch to the Red codec, and it just becomes a different camera. Different color science, different way it handles the dynamic range, and yes, different data rate, but if you work with cinema cameras, you're used to that. So basically you're getting 2 cameras for the price of one already very cheap camera. So if you don't want to watch all of this and you just want my general opinion right off the bat, This camera is that good, and I will definitely be buying one. As far as ergonomics go, I'm sure you can build it out. You put a cage on it, you can put an external monitor, wire that through the micro HDMI, and then you can do wireless out from that monitor. So if you really wanted to, yes, you could rig this camera out to still connect to your first AC's monitor, and then a video village, and so on. It'll probably include a little bit of Franken rigging. Again, context. For the price, that's all fine with me. So that's all I'll say about ergonomics. As far as the menu system goes, pretty intuitive. The camera does do some weird things off the bat that you kind of have to navigate through and fix. If you want to find out what those are, this guy Brandon Talbot, sorry if I pronounce your name wrong, did a great video on what those quirks are, so you can figure those out on his channel. Him and some other YouTubers have also done a lot of great coverage surrounding this camera. Autofocus. I almost never use autofocus. Once I have this camera in my hands and Nikon glass, I will use autofocus. I did some brief tests with it and it was really good. I can definitely see myself using it for sit-down interviews, product shots, things of that nature. So great autofocus. Image stabilization. It's really good. I don't think it's quite as good as Panasonic's, but it's very usable. I'm sure I'll turn that on a bunch for certain shoots as well. Again, those are not even features I need to have. I consider those bells and whistles. I do have a retainer with a pretty large company that needs a lot of product and lifestyle videos. For those types of videos, those features will pretty much always be turned on. And then for narrative filmmaking, I'll just turn those features off. And let's talk photography. I love photography. If I can swing it, I pretty much take my camera everywhere. This takes phenomenal photos. I know it doesn't have a mechanical shutter, so you lose that cool click sound, but it still takes amazing photos, and I don't need an EVF because of that incredible 4-inch screen on the back. I can see myself using this for astrophotography, which I've taken up as a hobby, definitely travel photography, and paid photography, because sometimes my clients do need photos as well. It's also perfect for location scouts, especially if you're shooting your project on a RED, like the Komodo or the Raptor. This has a red LUT that you can bake into the photos. All right, last thing we'll get out of the way before the image quality is the audio. The audio is really good. Again, bells and whistles. They did not need to add 32-bit float internal audio, but they did anyway. And they also offer different directionality of the internal mics. So you can have front-facing directional pickup on the internal mics of the camera. Let's take a look at what that sounds like compared to using a wireless lav. All right, this is, sorry, I have messy hair. This is a directional mic test. So this is the internal mics, 32-bit float, directional. So now I'm talking to the side, now I'm talking at the camera, now I'm talking to the side, just to kind of see how well this handles audio, just as is. Here's me just kind of testing my workflow, like how I would shoot something for YouTube or whatever. This is just internal mic. I'm not really doing anything other than that. This is ProRes. This is the same setup, but on red code raw. Again, internal mic. I see the audio's picking up. Hopefully it sounds nice. And yeah, I just have a little LED panel up here bouncing to the wall. We got the windows in the back. See how that looks. So it sounds pretty good. There's a lot of scenarios like event shooting or BTS where I could see myself using the internal mics of the camera. Okay, now that that stuff's out of the way, let's get into what everyone wants to talk about, the image quality. When it comes to the image quality of this camera, I want to reiterate again that I am offering a certain perspective on how I view these images. This perspective is based on 10 years of cinematography with almost every camera you can think of, specifically with a focus on narrative filmmaking, but also with the capability of needing data-friendly images that I can turn out quick and easy. So to let you in a little bit on my perspective and the types of cameras that I might compare this to, I'm just going to show you a list of all of the cameras that I've worked with. So let's just go through that for a little bit. So as you can see, I've worked with a variety of different cameras. So I have a pretty good understanding of the flexibility of this camera compared to other ones that I've worked with. Let's get this one out of the way really quick. It's not an Alexa. Nothing will ever be an Alexa. Alexa is just like a different thing that we should not compare anything to. I think the range this sits in is obviously the FX3, or even the S1H that I'm shooting on right now. I think the S1H is 5 or 6 years old at this point, and I still think it's one of the most slept on, best mirrorless cameras that have ever been given to us. So these are more the types of cameras I'm directly comparing the Nikon ZR to. So let's go through the codecs. I did not shoot NRAW or ProRes RAW, so there won't be any of that in this video. The reason I didn't shoot those is because I don't see myself ever using them. As I stated in the beginning, I see this as two different cameras. In one camera, I'm gonna be using the H.265 or maybe the ProRes 10-bit. In the other camera, I'm using the red code. That's what I'm gonna go to every time. So let's talk H.265. I've seen some complaints about the H.265 being unusable or mushy or low quality, etc. If you're zooming in at 400%, okay, you're gonna find some things. But if you're talking things that are gonna go on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, the H.265 codec is more than enough. It shoots N-Log, it grades pretty nicely, and it's plenty fine for the types of things that I'd be using it for. The data rate is very friendly, and I can shoot all day on the H.265 codec for tons of different jobs. Let's take a look at some tests I did with that codec. Now, just for shits and giggles, I did something a little different than zooming in at 400% because no one's gonna actually do that in real life. I'm gonna offer, again, a different perspective because I happen to have an 120-inch screen with a theatrical projector setup. So I actually fired some of that footage up on my projector. My couch is about 7 feet away from the projector. So it's basically as close as you can get to going to a movie theater within a Los Angeles apartment. I understand it's kind of hard to see the detail through that camera, but I'm telling you, I was sitting right there, and if it's good enough for an 120-inch screen, it's more than fine for Instagram and YouTube and TikTok. So I would not shame the H.265 codec that much. It's a very capable codec, and we will compare it directly to the red code RAW. So that brings me to the next codec I'll probably use often, the ProRes 10-bit. Very similar to the H.265, maybe even a little bit more flexible, and a little bit higher of a data rate. So it hits that perfect middle ground of music videos, maybe higher end corporate interviews, maybe even some short films. And I just love that this camera offers those ranges of codec because I can sort of gauge which one to use for certain projects. It makes this an incredibly flexible camera. So that brings us to the other camera. Let's get into the red code RAW. If you want, you can stop the video here and actually watch another video I posted. It's about 10 minutes long of all of the red code RAW footage I put and stress test. We go through overexposure, underexposure, highlight recovery, shadow recovery, stressing it with different colors, different lighting scenarios, uncontrolled lighting, controlled lighting, both ISOs, 800 and 6400, and the 60 frames per second, as well as the 120 frames per second. That video goes more in depth, but right now let's just take a look at some of that footage. Now, if we do a quick comparison to the red code RAW and the other codecs, you will see some differences. I wouldn't say there's a huge drop in dynamic range or anything like that, but the colors are very, very different. The H.265 and the ProRes lean a lot more magenta. But that's why I say these are two different cameras. As much as it seems sensible to compare the H.265 to the red code because it's all coming from the same sensor, I wouldn't compare them. I would almost treat it like two different film stocks. Just choose the right one for the right project. So as you can see, I find the red codec to be very, very good. Again, bells and whistles. They did not even need to put that in this camera, and they still gave it to us anyway. Is it exactly like the Komodo or exactly like the V-Raptor? No, it's not exactly like either of those cameras. But the fact that it comes as close as it does for this price range is kind of mind-blowing. I can put the same LUTs on it that I use for other red cameras, and it grades very similarly. It's an extremely flexible codec. The colors are incredible. I know it's not 16-bit, but that 12-bit still gets you a lot of the way there. It has this gradation and richness that you really get from red cameras. It's these nuanced things, like even the way the blue sky reflects off certain clothing. Not every camera picks up on detail like that. Is it noisy in the shadows? Yeah. Guess what else is? All the red cameras. Most red cameras need light. They're not known for being highly sensitive cameras. That's what the Sonys are for. So if you're used to that workflow anyway when you light scenes, you're gonna be very used to this codec. And the noise also cleans up pretty nicely. You can also see that these are extreme testing conditions that I did. If you're lighting a scene 4 stops over or 4 stops under, you need to go back and relearn some things. So I don't think you'll be in those scenarios where you need to stretch the image as much as I was in these tests. If you expose your shots correctly, I actually found the noise to be pretty pleasing. For the most part, it has a pretty nice grain to it, and I love to play in the shadows. That's why I did this moody test shot. I wanted to see that if you intended to underexpose your image and keep it that way, it holds up very well. As far as highlight recovery, I think this thing is on par with most of the other cameras out today. I don't necessarily think it's any better or worse. If anything, I would say it leans on the side of better. You can see in these sunset shots, we pulled a lot of information back. But again, if you're pointing the camera directly at the sun, it's gonna blow out parts of the image. And this was also all natural lighting. In a real world scenario, I'm sure I would have bounce around and negative fill, things to bring up exposure on my face, and all of that will balance out really nicely with how it held the highlights in the background. So I get it. I know Gerald Undun's review and Cine D, and they did the lab tests and everyone was like, man, the dynamic range really falls short. But lab tests are very different than real world scenarios and how this camera handles dynamic range to the eye. And in my opinion, I thought it was very close to right up there with the Komodo and other red cameras I've used. I guess the short of it is if you know what you're doing, this camera has more than enough dynamic range to make you very, very happy. I also briefly want to talk about this kind of indescribable things that the red codec gives you. There's something the red cameras have always had that's just this thickness to the negative. It's not really something you can scientifically describe or point out. It's more of like a feeling you get from when you're watching the footage. That could be the color depth, it could be the motion cadence, how people and things move in the frame. But I will say this camera has all of that. When I was grading the red codec, it just felt like red footage. We can briefly talk about the 60 frames per second and 120 frames per second. I thought it was great. I love that it doesn't crop on the 60 frames per second. Scientifically, I don't know how they're doing that because it's supposed to be raw data, so I thought you needed to crop, but I'm not complaining. It looked great to my eye. And then the 120 frames per second, you can still shoot in 4K and the crop is pretty minimal. Is it noisier? Yes. Does it clean up nicely? Yes. Again, I watched that on my 120-inch projector screen and it looked really good. That also goes for the second base ISO of 6400. It looked phenomenal. I keep saying it, but I'm gonna say it again, bells and whistles. They did not need to give us a dual native of 6400, but they did anyway. And it looks really good. I will definitely use the ZR for night exteriors and night interiors and be way more efficient with my lighting. So when I test a camera, I usually aim pretty high. And when it comes to the red codec and the Nikon ZR, the question I really ask myself is, can I shoot an entire feature film on this, project it onto a movie theater screen, and be happy? My answer is yes, I would happily do so. Now in my bigger budget features, we rent the cameras anyway, but I will definitely bring this along as a B cam, a crash cam, a camera you can put into funky places. It's gonna work great for that. But for more indie features with lower budgets, I can absolutely see myself using the Nikon ZR to shoot the entire thing as my A camera. Yes, you gotta rig it out more, it's kinda awkward, but at the end of the day, it's just a sensor. And what that sensor gives you is a phenomenal cinematic image for $2,000. Again, that's insane. I came from the days of Micro Four Thirds digital sensors and the original Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera. And now we have a $2,000 camera that shoots 6K full frame red code RAW. That is not to be slept on. The hype is real, this camera's the real deal. So for all of its little shortcomings and maybe its quirks, I would put all of those aside, because what this camera delivers at its price point is probably the most impressive mirrorless camera that's ever been given to us. I've owned many cinema cameras before. I've owned a lot of mirrorless cameras too. At the end of the day, I'm greedy. I want something that does it all. I want something that I can throw in a backpack with a couple batteries and a couple lenses and shoot all day with. Great photography, data-friendly codecs that I can shoot all day with, no need for an external monitor, autofocus, IBIS, dual native ISO, just run and gun, get it done. This camera does all of that very, very well. But then to add just this massive cherry on top, that it can shoot extremely cinematic red code RAW footage, and I can use this camera for narrative filmmaking, this camera does that too. So that's my thoughts on the Nikon ZR. Please like this video and subscribe if you guys want to follow along for more filmmaking tips and tricks, and I'll see you on the next one.